The Duke of Wellington once said, "There was never a country in which poverty existed to the extent that exists in Ireland." In 1837, there was a survey of the miserable living conditions of the people of this area, Gurtahurk in County Donegal. Of the 9,000 people living here at the time, there were only 10 beds and 93 chairs. Put that another way, for every 90 people there was only one chair to sit on, and for every 900, only one bed to sleep in. In the 100 or so years before the famine, the thing that struck most visitors to Ireland was the poverty of the people.
Irish misery forms a type by itself of which neither the model nor the imitation can be found anywhere else. In all countries, paupers may be discovered, but an entire nation of paupers is what never was seen until it was shown in Ireland. To explain the social condition of such a country, it would be only necessary to recount its miseries and its sufferings. The history of the poor is the history of Ireland.
I have visited the wasted remnants of the once noble red man on his reservation grounds in North America and explored the Negro quarters of the degraded and enslaved African. But never have I seen misery so intense or physical degradation so complete as among the dwellers in the bog holes of Ireland.
Imagine 4 walls of dry mud, which the rain, as it falls, easily restores to its primitive condition, having for its roof a little straw or some sods, for its chimney a hole cut in the roof, or very frequently the door, through which alone the smoke finds an issue. One single apartment contains father, mother, children, and sometimes a grandfather or a grandmother. There is no furniture in the wretched hovel. A single bed of straw serves the entire family. In the midst of all lives a dirty pig, the only thriving inhabitant of the place, for he lives in filth.
By 1845, Ireland was a source of grave anxiety to England. Ireland had first been invaded in 1169. The country had been conquered not once, but several times. The land had been seized and redistributed over and over again. The population had been brought to the verge of extinction by the curse of Cromwell. Yet an Irish nation survived, separate, hostile, and growing more numerous every day. Ireland's problems in the 19th century were largely the fruit of a consistent long-term British policy, which was to ensure that John Bull's other Ireland could never, ever threaten the political or economic interests of John Bull himself. (1691).
No Catholic may be a member of Parliament, or vote, or hold any office under the government.
1695.
No Catholic may be educated abroad, or maintain a school in Ireland. Penalty, expulsion to the West Indies. No Catholic may buy land, raise a mortgage, or lease land for more than 31 years. On the death of a Catholic landowner, the land must be divided among all his sons. A son who becomes a Protestant automatically inherits all his father's property. In 1600, Protestants owned 10% of the land of Ireland. By 1778, Protestants owned more than 95% of the land of Ireland.
The law is a machine as well fitted for the oppression, impoverishment, and degradation of a people, and the debasement in them of human nature itself, as ever proceeded from the perverted ingenuity of man.
Persecution of minorities on grounds of religion was commonplace in the 17th century. Ireland, however, was unique in 2 ways. In Ireland, a small minority persecuted the majority, and the persecution lasted for a century longer than elsewhere. Because there was no industrial employment, access to a piece of land to grow food was literally the difference between life and death. Even the smallest pieces of rocky ground were brought into intense cultivation. In 1759, restrictions imposed almost a century earlier on the importation of cattle to England were removed. Ranching became economic again. Eviction of tenants and destruction of their homes became the order of the day. Whole villages were swept away.
Undoubtedly, it was the landlord's right to do as he pleased, and if he abstained, he conferred a favour and was doing an act of kindness. If, on the other hand, he chose to stand on his right, the tenants must be taught by the strong arm of the law that they have no power to oppose or resist. Property would be valueless, and capital would no longer be invested in cultivation of land if it were not acknowledged that it was the landlord's undoubted, indefeasible and most sacred right to deal with his property as he chooses.
As a result of the desperate competition for land, rents rose sixfold in the 18th century.
In Ireland alone, the whole agricultural population can be evicted by the mere will of the landlord. In Ireland alone, the bulk of the population, wholly dependent on the land, cannot look forward to a single year's occupation of it.
After the revision of rental agreements in the 1820s, Irish land was rented at about £2.50 per acre, a figure slightly in excess of that currently pertaining in Britain at the time. But in Ireland, the situation was exacerbated even more so by the fact that between the landlord and many of the tenantry there existed a level of middlemen, or a layer of middlemen, who extracted their own profit margin. The result was that very often subtenants in Ireland paid rents exorbitantly high. In County Armagh, for instance, in 1840 on the Mandeville estate near Tandregee, subtenants were paying upwards of £10 per acre for manured conacre land. A figure which, to put it in perspective, was being paid by a tenantry earning upwards of 1 shilling per day for their labour. And as a matter of interest, when I was completing a PhD thesis in 1973, conacre in that same part of Armagh was even then only retailing at £10 per acre, despite 130 years of inflation.
If a tenant's profits exceeded 1/3 of his rent, any Protestant who could prove the fact might take possession of the farm. Any improvements made by the tenant became the property of the landlord without compensation. On many estates, it was the practice to put a farm up for auction on the expiry of a lease. Therefore, tenants had no motive to improve, because if their property became more valuable, they might not be able to afford to buy it back at the auction.
I have asked the immigrant Irish farmer in America why he does not toil at home from sunrise to sundown as he does there. And I have asked the emigrant, about to leave his native shore for the unknown West, why he did not employ his little capital and labour in improving the land of Ireland. The answer invariably has been that they would much prefer toiling and expending their little capital at home if they had land at a fair rent, and leases which would enable them to enjoy with certainty the fruits of their labour.
In England, the relationship between the landlord and his tenantry was bonded somewhat by a similarity of religious background and also a background of geographical closeness. In Scotland, that bonding was increased even further by the fact that many Scottish landlords were in fact clan leaders and had a blood relationship